Awesome. in different ways, so whatever way works.
All right, I'll call this work session to order. We'll start out with tree code update. We'll have our Public Works Director, Peter Pastorelli, and Gina Dake, who's, are you the chair or not the chair? Tree board member.
Tree board?
Tree board arborist.
Yes. Gina's our vice chair also.
Okay.
Yeah. So thank you, Mayor Gamba and council members. Tonight, I wanted to spend a little bit of time and talk about our tree code and give you an update on where we are. And then Natalie will join us near the end, and we'll present one of the tools we've been developing, our canopy analytics tool that we've been developing, branch out Milwaukee tool. So we'll spend some time looking at that as well. So why are we updating our tree code? Well, really, the main reason is we want to get it in line with our goals. Our vision speaks of having a verdant canopy of beneficial trees in the community. Our climate action plan identifies some strategies related to our urban forest canopy, both for adaptation, mitigation, and sequestration. And then we also identified some goals in our urban forest management plan. To help us get to those goals, we need to make some updates to our tree code. So it's something that the tree board's been very passionate about and has been working on, but we've tried to really been deliberate and thoughtful and patient and trying to put it together. So we put something together that's well thought out, and it fits the city of Milwaukee's needs as a community, and is integrated as well with the rest of our code. So I don't know how easy it is to read that, but an update. So we really started working on this back in February of 2018. We met with the city council. The tree board had a work plan that had identified three main goals. Develop an urban forest management plan, which we adopted in March of this year, 2019. Work on tree code updates and do community outreach and education.
I'd like to amend your timeline a little bit.
Sure.
I think it was 2 years before that we asked PARB to do a tree code. Mm-hmm. And they started working, or maybe it was longer than two and a half, something like that. So this has been...
Yeah, it's been going since 2015. That's in some way or another, yeah.
And they did sort of the part one where it was just about the public right-of-way and public property instead of going for the full meal deal.
So, one of the things we realized as we started working on this and developing the work plan was really identifying what we were trying to accomplish with making those updates to the tree code. And, the previous slide I mentioned, we want to get those in line with our city's vision, our climate action goals, and our urban forest management plan. So we actually thought as a tree board that it was important to develop that urban forest management plan first and get that adopted by council before we started presenting tree code updates to make changes to the tree code, to make sure that those things were in alignment and agreed with those other documents. So the spring and summer, we certainly were busy reviewing. We did do some of these things in parallel with updating or putting together our urban forest management plan. But we spent a lot of time in 2018 researching and reviewing our current tree code and researching what other tree codes are out there and what other cities were doing regionally and also outside the region as well to see what those were going on there. And then we worked on drafting that initial urban forest management plan, putting a draft together. And then the summer we had some engagement and outreach related to our urban forest management plan. Based on that outreach, we refined it and made some changes to it, and then brought it to council in the early part of the winter of late fall, early winter of 2018, early 2019 to get some additional guidance, made some additional refinements, and then we brought something back in March that we adopted, the Urban Forest Management Plan. The winter winter or spring of this last year. As I said, we made some changes. We started to develop and refine some suggested changes to the code based on the Urban Forest Management Plan. And then we spent a lot of time also working towards integrating proposed policies into the comprehensive plan based off of goals that we've identified in the Urban Forest Management Plan and the Climate Action Plan as well. So, we had discussions about that at the tree board, and I think some of the tree board members participated in the open house and spent some time there as well to give some feedback onto that. Over this past summer, we took the draft document related to the public and street tree code and worked hard on that. Myself, Gina, Julian, and can't think who else was part of that. Well, the rest of the team also reviewed, but the three of us actually met together as a subcommittee and worked on that initial draft of the tree code, and we've brought that to the tree board in August and the early part of September, and have made some additional refinements to that. And now our next step with that piece is to bring it to the rest of the staff in the city. So our engineering and planning, and to review, to make sure that those things are integrated as well. And I've got some further on slides that will talk about some of the things that we're looking at on those changes. So the next steps, like I said, we're going to coordinate with our planning department on those code changes, staff review of proposed amendments, not just public, but also related to development and private. And then we're going to work hard with the team to sort of work alongside that comprehensive plan community engagement piece to bring forth these updates to our tree code. So the initial package that we focused on was our Chapter 1632, the public tree code. So that's the early piece that I think we're gonna see coming to council for review in the early part of the year. And then we'll certainly have some additional work with the Planning Commission related to some of the development code that we have some, I'm going to say some initial drafts on that need some further refinement based with the tree board, and then some work with the staff as well. And then we'll schedule a work session to talk with council on where we are on the development side and public side as well. And then, the early part of the winter, perhaps into that early part of spring, we'll present Chapter 1632 to council for adoption. And then the summer, late summer or fall, based on early timeline coordination with Denny, I think we're going to see some proposed amendments related to development and perhaps private trees, protection and preservation of private trees. So that's the general timeline of what we're doing. I did want to talk about, how we're developing this code. What are we looking at as we're doing that? So what we really wanted to do is make sure that the goals that we've identified in our vision, in our climate action and urban forest management plan are also captured, and there's provisions inside the code that relate to those things. So, early on in the code, it states what the purpose of the tree code is. So we're going to try to capture that language and bring that into the code and strengthen some of the language that's already there. We're going to as we've been drafting this, we wanted to make sure that responsibility was clearly designated, and that the authority was granted commensurate with that responsibility. So we'll talk a little bit about that further on, what that means. But generally, we have an arborist on staff now, so we want to make sure our tree code reflects that, and it reflects that that person has responsibility to do certain things that aren't in that code currently right now. We want to make sure that we've identified basic performance standards. So some of the performance standards are in our public works standards. So we want to make sure that that's clearly communicated to everybody, that that's where you go to look at street tree lists and how you plant trees and how far those spacings are, because that public works standards allows us a little bit more flexibility on how we make adjustments to those standards. We want to make sure we have flexibility in our ordinance to make sure that, there's the ability to be flexible on how we make decisions related to permits, perhaps, and in terms of, or how we deal with low-income assistance and things like that related to urban forest related issues. And then just making sure that our enforcement methods are clearly specified and identified throughout the code. And there's some integration that needs to go on the public side, and then as well as the private protection and preservation side that we need to make sure are in there. And then the two last things there, that's sort of contextual. We just want to make sure those updates are, we're developing this as a comprehensive piece. So that's why we did that urban forest management plan first. And we're working with our comp plan and taking advantage of the comprehensive engagement and outreach process that's going to be part of the adoption of the code amendments related to the comprehensive plan. So we're going to take advantage of that. And of course, we want to make sure what we're doing is developed with the support of the community. So we had a little bit of that community outreach last summer, and we're going to take advantage of the community outreach and engagement piece with the comprehensive plan too.
So will this also then inform other pieces of the code, like the design standards or whatever, so that there's the maximum chance of a tree doing well and not tearing up sidewalks and all that stuff?
Yes, ideally, yes, absolutely. That's the plan. So that, that relates to some of the things that are in our public works standards. So what type of trees can you plant in the space that's available? We don't want to plant trees that are going to have high roots that grow very shallow and pop up sidewalks. So those are some of the things that we're considering as we do that. So Chapter 1632, so that's what's titled really our tree cutting code. So
Awkward.
it's an awkward one, yeah. So I really want to change that. So, I've got those pictures there. I want to go to where it's more of we're caring and providing and preserving our trees, protecting our trees. So one of the things that we're going to propose is changing the title to that chapter. So the first phase of code, like I said, focuses the updates on the public and street trees. And it's meant to improve the alignment with our vision and goals. We've gone through and added a significant amount of definitions as we've gone through the code to make sure things are clear, to better define what we mean in our code. There's some technical language that we didn't feel was adequately described, as well as some of the additional language that we've added in there we need to take a look at. We're also making some changes to the tree board's future roles and responsibilities, suggesting that they're more of an advisory role, since we have an arborist on staff that reflects that we have an on-staff arborist. There's some language there to establish a tree fund, to provide a place to put dollars for tree and urban forest related expenses. And then, as I said before, we've put language in there that spells out the administrative responsibilities of the staff that we now have on hand, our natural resources coordinator. Julian is an arborist, a certified arborist. So we want to reflect and take advantage of those skills and experiences that he has and better utilize him. In general, he's going to basically have that serve as that arborist role for the city and also work towards taking care of the permitting process related to street trees and public trees. And then, of course, there's some style changes to reflect some of the types of language that council would like to change some of the style from, I think, will and shall and things like that. So we've made some changes to those sorts of things. I think in the staff report I had a table that goes into a little bit more detail. So we've got a good draft right now that we're going to staff with the rest of the city staff, our planning and engineering department. I've had certainly some discussions with them over the last 2 years. I've had discussions with Steve Adams, our city engineer. He feels very comfortable with the change in the permitting process from what I've described. But there's still some work we need to do in-house with the staff to make sure that those things are there. And as well to make sure that what we do on this public piece, we reduce the amount of changes that we need to do in the future when we make changes to the development, the zoning, and the protection and preservation of private trees as well. So that's really sort of the flavor of the changes that we're looking at. And then I did want to bring up again, so, as we're doing this, we want to take advantage of the community engagement process that we're doing with our comp plan and really utilize the feedback so we can develop a strong tree ordinance, tree code that helps us incentivize tree protection that's equitable and provides flexibility. We think we've got a pretty good understanding of the public and street tree piece. There's still some significant work related to the development and private piece that we need to do with the community. We want to make sure that we get a diverse cross-section of the community engaged and to make sure that there's an awareness of the trade-offs related to these code changes. And generally educate and inform the community on why updating our tree code is important and why our urban forest is important as well. So that's some of the things that we're looking at doing related to the community engagement piece. Any questions on that?
I had a question not so much about the code, but about what you've already accomplished, which is you guys have already updated all the street tree lists. Is that right?
So the street tree list is, we have made updates to the street tree list. I think it's going through that public works standards update. So it is open for public comment. I think engineering has put that online for public comment.
Oh, right now?
I think it is.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
So one of the things that we've done with that street tree list, we've made some, in general, we made some changes to reflect, to make sure that we're planting the right tree in the right place. And also looking towards the future to make sure that, as the climate changes here in the region, that we're planting trees that are going to that are going to thrive into the future. So there certainly are some changes to there are some different species that we've introduced into that list. There's some that we've removed from that list. There's still a good group of native trees that we've identified that are street that should be planted. One of the other things that we're working on too is a suggested yard tree list that we'll be putting out that I don't think necessarily needs to be codified, but Julian and the tree board have been working on that as well.
And so the street tree list is divided between under wires and not under wires or something?
It is, and also the space in that planning space, that parkway space.
Okay.
And in the planning space area, I mean, I will go find this, but, one of the things that I have definitely found on the Portland side of my yard, but not necessarily on the Milwaukee side, is that it would be really helpful to know, in addition to, overhead wires and, space. I mean, I think, the Portland code makes a really good distinction between whether or not, a road is improved or not and has planting strips or not, and, really spells out the different types of conditions that exist, that we know exist throughout our city. I mean, what we can plant, and it actually, and the code, the permit allows for you to plant on an unimproved road based on, on these certain conditions. And so it would be really nice to have, to make sure that engineering is also considering that. And maybe even look at the Portland permit to get some idea about, how to offer the public guidance on, these trees are acceptable for under these certain conditions, because the conditions are so different across the city.
That's a good point.
The different widths of right-of-ways vary, even on an unimproved versus, well, even among unimproved roads, they vary quite dramatically.
I believe there is a part of the list reflects, or there's something there for the unimproved roads where you don't have sidewalks as well.
Mm-hmm. Or curbs.
Or curbs,
yeah. I mean, some of our roads are 18 feet wide.
Yeah, it'd be great if somebody could send us the link for that.
Yeah, that would be very helpful.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that right-of-way piece is going to be the most challenging piece of this whole rewrite is because figuring out whose responsibility is what, and you called it out in your presentation very clearly that was sticky, but I guess I just wanted to say it for the record that I know that the tree board is thinking about that very carefully as they're moving forward, and I know that you're talking with planning and trying to figure out what is the way to get healthy trees planted in the places they ought to be planted in the city, and to make sure that we're talking with neighbors and doing that in a way that is understanding of their needs and wants, and figuring out where we all meet in the middle.
Absolutely.
And on the community engagement piece, I don't want to get too wild and crazy here, but I was just struck by the wording is, in general, urban forest health is important, and I was also thinking about celebrating our trees. Maybe it's just because I saw the really cool postcards that we put together for Arbor Day. But there's something to be said for celebration as a piece of how we build community engagement with our urban forest canopy, and help private homeowners who may have really beautiful trees on their property and then have to pay for that somehow, to help them really feel appreciated and help them understand that we all acknowledge and understand that they're stewards of something that's really valuable to us in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, absolutely. And that brings up something that we'll talk about a little bit later tonight, because we have an Arbor Day proclamation on our city council. But just as a reminder, October 19th at between 10 to 12 a.m., 10 in the morning to 12 p.m., we're going to have our Arbor Day celebration at our Johnson Creek campus, and we'll be doing ceremonial tree planting and an opportunity for volunteers to come out to the campus and help us plant some more trees besides that ceremonial tree. We've got some sort of if you think it in terms of skiing, sort of the blue slope to plant, where it's easy to plant. We've got some more difficult places to plant that we're looking at needing some help with. So we're looking for volunteers, and I know we have it on our website, to RSVP to come out there. We also will have a tree giveaway and some refreshments as well. So,
Great.
thanks. Gina, I don't know if you had anything you wanted to add.
Well, you had mentioned about the street trees and that list getting redone. One of the things that we had done not too long after I came along was we decided what some of the tree board's priorities were, and we wrote a lot of those out. And we did have a landscaper on staff, Rebecca, who was pretty annoyed with the current street tree list, and it was a very high priority of hers to work on that list. And we decided to form different subcommittees to work on different issues, and one of those subcommittees was the street tree list. And we got to work pretty soon after our subcommittee was formed and went through it sort of size class by size class until we had something that we could turn over. And we've done the same thing for outreach as well as for tree code. So if you have particular issues that you'd like for the tree board to focus on, or subcommittees that you would like to see formed, please let Peter know and pass that information on to us.
Thanks.
So do we have a number of trees goal for this year to get planted?
A number goal? Not a specific number goal. I think, though, we will, by the end of the year, this year, we'll probably have planted throughout the community, to include the Friends of Tree event that we had, and our city planning will probably have planted about 500 trees throughout the community.
So that's the end of 2019?
2019, yeah.
Okay.
And does that include the Kellogg Good Neighbor Committee plantings out in the Kellogg Creek Park?
Well, it depends on when they plant those. So
Okay.
I had not counted those ones, no.
Okay.
So that
You should put
could be
those in there,
some
too.
significant.
That question is a great transition into the branch out
Yeah.
slide.
Branch
Yeah.
out, haha.
So I am going to have Natalie come up here to talk about our branch out piece, or show you the software. But so we've been working with Vivek Chandas from Portland State to help us put together a canopy analytics tool that helps us take a look at our urban forest canopy and help us use it as a tool to help us develop a planning strategy that's both equitable and strategic as we move forward to where we have a defined number of how many trees we're going to plant each year, and we have a better definition of where we're planting, where we are able to make sure that we're taking advantage of the space, the places that are have a low canopy percentage, where we can make improvements to urban heat island effects, and we'll be able to make improvements to the community and improve the quality of life here in the city. So we have the tool. There's some minor refinements that still need to be made, but I'm going to have Natalie walk you through the tool and show you what it does.
Before you, I had one more question. Broad strokes, where are we headed with code for new development?
So, broad strokes, we want to make sure that that mature trees that are on properties are preserved to the greatest extent. Trees that are on a development site that don't interfere with the layout of a new property are protected during development, that there's not additional damage that's done to trees that are next to those things, and that we want to make sure that that the canopy, that future canopy goals are met. So if a site's being developed, after development, that there's trees there that they're going to help that site meet that 40% canopy coverage goal when they're mature. So that I think of the broad piece.
Okay, so I may be mishearing that, but what I'm hearing is that we're not trying to cause development to fit the trees. We are still allowing development to do whatever development wants to do and then preserve as many of the trees that aren't in their way as possible. As opposed to saying, for example, the maximum you can reduce the canopy on any given piece of property is 50%. So figure it out from there.
Well,
If you have to change your lot lines, if you have to change your dense, all of those things so that you can make sure you preserve 50%, do it.
well, I wonder if there isn't, I'm sorry, may I just?
Yeah.
I wonder if there isn't an opportunity, so you're talking a lot about flexibility with the requirements for canopy, and I'm wondering, if there isn't an opportunity for, as you're engaging with, planning and rewriting of code, if there isn't also opportunity for flexibility in some of those standards that you're talking about.
Well, certainly the Comprehensive Plan Committee has directed that be a thing, that we write our codes so that there's enough flexibility in all the other parts of the code so that we can maximize tree preservation. But I think if there's not a backstop there of some variety, they're not going to care.
So the backstop that we've considered, that we've discussed, is trees of a certain diameter need to be protected. And if they can't be protected, you have to mitigate by planting a certain amount of additional trees, or there's a certain cost associated with that. I mean, certainly we want to take advantage of the canopy that's on the site, the existing canopy, and do everything that you can to preserve that canopy.
But we're not looking at any kind of hard number that makes them preserve it?
Well, the hard number would be the diameter of the tree that needs to be in place, and if that tree's being removed, there's a cost, a penalty associated with removing that tree. So we've had some discussions about that.
It's mostly just been discussion at this point because previously the tree board president was very keen on Portland's code, and Milwaukee is not Portland, and what works in Portland may not work for Milwaukee. So we want to be very deliberate in crafting something that will work for a municipality of our size, and while also balancing the needs of climate-forward strategies moving forward, where we have found that trees are infrastructure, trees are assets, trees are not a want anymore, they are a need, and so is development, so is a healthy economy. And we're going to be having a lot of very tough discussions, and we would love to hear from council, if they have directions, please let us know as early as possible so that we can balance those with outreach with the public and some engagement of the development community.
Well, and I think interdepartment collaboration too. I mean, I think like if there's a 100-year-old tree to be saved, but for a lot line requirement that is written into our own code, that we have control over, it seems like there's an opportunity there for us to, kind of solve our own the problems of our own making.
Right. But if there's not some hard stop, there is no incentive to care about that. And I mean, the wording you used when you said, well, if it's of a certain diameter, and I would push back on that, and I would say of a certain diameter of what species, right? Because a redwood is going to be one diameter, whereas what were those trees over there that got cut down that caused the kerfuffle, the beech trees that were old, that could potentially have been older than a redwood 3 times their size. I would try and base it more, either have a per species list or
So
some,
yeah, we have had those discussions, that there are,
Yeah, but
you know,
then you-
culturally
prove it at the core.
sensitive trees. What's the term?
Cultural keystone species.
Cultural keystone species that we want to provide extra protection to. But, you know, the backstop would be that financial penalty.
So it's going to have to be severe then, because they're building $750,000 houses.
Right.
Yeah, I mean,
$1,000 fine or a $2,000 fine, they're like, hey, don't care. If we don't have to worry about where our bulldozers go while we're doing this, that is totally worth $5,000 to us. So it's going to have to be significant.
And in terms of, you know, looking to us, I guess, you know, we've never had the, you know, we haven't studied what's the Portland code or what's the Lake Oswego code and stuff. And I'd be interested to know that, you know, sort of where do they draw the line or what are their incentives? I did notice, I got an email from a Lake Oswego counselor last week, and I always thought Lake Oswego had this really tough tree code, but she said that in the last 3 years, we've cut down over 2,000 trees with an average diameter of 19 inches. So lots of big trees going down, even in Lake Oswego, where I think of them as having a, robust tree protection ordinance.
Which is
So-
exactly where I'm going, right? I think, I don't know this for a fact, but I think that their code is based something along the lines of, it will cost you more to
Right.
take down a big tree. And when you have people they don't care. So if our goal is to actually preserve trees, you know, maybe it's more than just, maybe we say, you know, an absolute minimum, you have to preserve 30% of the canopy, period, minimum. There is no ifs, ands, or buts, there's no flexibility, there's no nothing, 30%. Anything in the 50 to 30%, these are the fines or the penalties that you're going to pay for trees of these size. And then create flexibility in the way we do our lot lines and the way we do density minimums and maximums and all those things, so that we have more opportunity to
push people toward that route rather
Right.
than just,
Yeah.
there's almost no dollar amount that you could put on it, right?
Right.
So, because, you know, depending on what they're building, you know, it'll probably always work out to be in their better business interest to go ahead and cut down the tree, right?
Well-
So, I mean, I think I like options, right? I like providing the incentive for, you know, for a developer to do the right, you know, to do the better thing. And if we have an avenue that sort of like encourages them to take that route, then I think that we're in a better position to do both of the good things, right?
Well, and
build
there
the
are
housing
some
we
things
need
maybe
and-
we should be discussing, like keeping canopy gets you a reduction on your stormwater SDCs, because keeping
Right.
canopy, you know, does.
So,
Yeah.
I mean,
Right.
we've had that discussion, not just on the SDCs, but perhaps on your stormwater monthly bill.
Right. Which won't matter so much to a developer, because that's after the
Not-
fact
it's
for
after
them.
they sell.
anything that's incentive to the owner, developers aren't going to care about.
Right.
Right.
So, and
But-
keeping in mind, so I don't know if you all recall, but when Donovan gave his talk, he said the value of a house with a mature tree is $10,000 more than a value of a house without a mature tree, and it's $5,000 to each of your neighbors. So in my mind, that's a $20,000 tree.
Yes. Yeah.
Right there. So you want to cut that tree down? It's $20,000.
And I
There's
think,
100 of them, it's $20,000 a tree.
well, and if we go that route, I think we also take the opportunity to educate developers somehow in the permitting process, where we say, look, this is the equation that we created, and this is why we think of it this way. This is a cost to you. It looks easier to cut this big tree down because it will make your job site much simpler. However, you are making a choice that has monetary impacts if you do that. In addition to, we're going to find the heck out of you, you know?
There's also a concern if you make it so that it's easier just not to go through the process at all than to deal with the city. You could get just rogue things going on that you don't even know about.
Right.
Where if you don't already have the enforcement in place to catch the people, well, you're going to charge me $20,000 a tree, I'm going to say there's no trees.
So we create a bounty. The guy next door that just cut down a tree.
Well, I mean, the beauty of this tool that you're about to demonstrate is that will help with that,
Right.
right?
LiDAR.
Because, I mean, I've always heard this story that in the 90s, which was before my time here, when the city started talking about a tree code, that there was a bunch of clearing that happened because certain landowners were
I've heard
anticipating.
those stories, and I've people who swear up and down that that's true. Take me out and point to a stump.
Yeah.
Prove to me that this happened. They can't do it.
Yeah.
They cannot show me one piece of property where a tree came down. But, I mean, maybe there is somebody out there that can, but all the people that I've done that to, they go, I don't know.
Well, this isn't the 90s, but I can show you where an industrial property owner has clear-cut a huge portion of their property just recently. And I don't have any information about whether it was in response to us doing this work, but it's pretty recent and pretty big.
I just would say, though, I mean, we want to make sure that there's a good understanding of what those trade-offs are. I mean, I know we've had the discussion about, how does this link in with our affordable housing and making sure that we don't make it overburdensome for affordable housing developments and things of that nature. So,
And we can draw lines there, that we can draw distinctions there. If you're building a $750,000 house, you're not building an affordable
Yeah.
No.
anything.
but we just want to make sure that the code that we develop has that flexibility and,
Right.
and is and there's a clear understanding of what the trade-offs are. I mean, I am I am very passionate about our urban forest. I want it to grow, and I want the city to invest more, not just the city itself, but the community to invest in its forest and take
I know
care.
we already do a little bit of this, but I'm curious about whether or not the group is also thinking about, maybe some stronger authority or enforcement or ability or, something to encourage, the taking down of invasives. I mean, we can all point to, I've ripped Tree of Heaven out of my yard. I can't tell you how many times, and a neighbor across the street from me has them growing like crazy. So I know exactly where they're coming from, and I know that the city has sent out letters to people letting them know, hey, you've got a giant invasive, it needs to come out. Is there any talk about maybe doing more?
Becky talks about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so yes.
Yeah.
I think we need a funding mechanism to get super serious about
Yeah,
that.
for sure. Education, too. I mean,
Yeah.
most people don't know what.
Yeah,
Right.
the only caveat I would throw out there, and I get that there are some trees we definitely, but there was a discussion at what was the big tree conference that we went to last year, or that,
At the World Forestry Center.
yeah, I forget. Anyway, all of these serious hardcore arborist, tree lover types were sitting in a room going, climate change is happening.
Oh, I agree. I don't think that.
Perhaps we need to expand our view on what's.
Sure.
I agree,
But
yeah,
things
I
that
mean-
are allopathic, that poison the soil beneath and go straight for your sewer lines
are
and your
really
water lines
prolific
and are prolific.
propagators,
Yes.
Those are different.
Yeah.
Those take over
I get that.
an
I just-
environment.
And the county and the city, there's classifications that are already in place for identifying the really, really, really bad ones, and then the not so bad, but they thrive here, invasives.
Any other comments or questions? I'd like to have Natalie come up here.
Yes,
Yeah.
sorry.
Thanks.
And
You're not the only one who's passionate about this.
let's see here.
Good afternoon. I'm Natalie Rogers, Climate Action Sustainability Coordinator for the city. I can testify that Peter's very passionate about trees.
I know.
And,
First thing I learned about it.
But yeah, so Branch Out Milwaukee. So this is actually a really cool tool that was developed by Dr. Vivek Chandis at Portland State, and he's actually taken it to a few other communities. It started out in Portland, actually, in our area, and I believe it was developed originally as an internal tool, but Jeannie might know. Was it?
It's available to the public, but it's mostly for internal use.
And so it's a really cool tool that we can use both for our own internal planting strategies, but also for public engagement, especially as we start to discuss how the urban forest is changing within our community. Right now, this tool is not available to the public just because we're tweaking a few things. As you'll see, the city boundary, we need to make sure we reflect the new annexations, but we will be having this publicly available on our website, on our urban forest pages, which are currently active, and we will make sure to let everyone know when that is publicly available as well. But for now, we just wanted to show you some of the cool features of it. So this originally starts out as a video kind of explaining how it uses the tool, and I think it uses Portland actually and steps through Portland's tool, but we're just going to go right into it. So here is our beautiful city of Milwaukee, and as you can tell, it's broken out into these census blocks, which actually extend past the city boundary. But the nice part about it is we can import in socioeconomic data from the census, so we can actually start looking at who's living in Milwaukee and how can we actually perform plantings, protect, plant, and promote trees in Milwaukee in a way that really targets the community that's living within these areas. So you can see these different shades of green, and that generally reflects the canopy cover or different values. But so you can see here there's different sliding bars on the left, including canopy cover percentage, urban heat index. So this is related to the urban heat island effect, essentially saying that higher developed areas with less vegetation, darker surfaces are more likely to be hot, especially as the climate changes. Cities in general are big heat sinks, meaning that the pavement collects heat over the day when the sun is shining down on it and then releases it at night, seeing higher temperatures. But the nice part is trees help mitigate a lot of these effects. And so there's a sliding box, and then you can see that the heat index is actually a calculation through Vivek Chandis's papers. And you can see these little information bubbles, which will pop up that explain a little bit, as well as air pollution index. So nitrogen dioxide is a general indicator of air pollution quantities in communities. But the cool part about this is you can start to slide these up and down so you can see where in the community things change. So if I'm looking for, let's see, our target is 40% canopy cover, right? So I'm only looking for communities that have around 40%. You can start to see that value changing on census blocks. So right now, you can see that the weight of the community is right around this 30% canopy cover or less currently. This also changes when we start to look at urban heat index. So a low value is better. And then air pollution index. Now, what's really valuable about this tool is the socioeconomic data incorporation. This is when we're really looking at having an equitable planting strategy, making sure that we're investing in communities that have been disadvantaged, marginalized, and generally ignored through history, and making sure that where we're planting is providing those community members benefits of trees. And so we have household income, and you can start to see those values right there, as well as percentage of people of color from the census. And this is from the last census, so we see this tool changing and incorporating new data as we get that data. So this incorporates LiDAR data from 2014. 2014, they're doing a new LiDAR flyover. Actually, Metro's completing it this summer. So we should have that data become available pretty soon. And we imagine essentially revamping this tool ever so often to make sure that that data is reflected and we can actually show the changes in our community over time. Now, a really cool feature of this tool is that when we click on these blocks, we can go down to the parcel level and do the same thing. And even beyond that, if we go even further in, so you can see there's address, there's canopy covers, percentage on the parcel level. We can kind of see owner address information in case the owner address is different than the parcel. we opted to not include owner name in there, even though that is publicly available information. It's just something maybe more sensitive that we want to keep aside. However, the cool part is we can export these addresses. So if we wanted to only focus on households that are right on the threshold of our 40% canopy cover for an outreach mechanism, we can narrow that window, that bandwidth, export all those addresses, and we can reach out to those homeowners. When you do zoom in to this lower level, you can also start to see these little right-of-way parcel or sections right here. That actually shows the street trees. So when we start to change some of this tree cover, you can see maybe where a parcel versus the right-of-way has different tree canopy covers. And that will be really important as Julian and Sinu and our natural resource team starts looking at where to plant street trees. And you can, just the same as tree cover, urban heat index, and air pollution is up here, we start to get different socioeconomic information, including parcel and street. You can also see renter occupied, owner occupied, multifamily, and single family, and then our improved and under-improved roads. And this neighborhood looks like it's all.
Is there a way to break out commercial, business, industrial folks from residential and the parcel level?
You know, I don't, not in the tool currently. Okay. And that's something that we were thinking about, but when it actually comes down to engaging, it's just on the parcel level. So we can export those addresses, and then we can use our existing GIS data set, and we can kind of balance the two of those. Yeah.
So under land use, where are they categorized then? In the MFR?
So the multifamily is going to be a multifamily residence.
Right, I understand that, but I mean, like, there are commercial properties that are getting.
Yes, but it's not like commercial industrial, so we don't call out, there's not a toggle tool to just pull out the industrial or like business properties.
Yeah, I just started getting curious because it's looking, oh, well, that's the hospital right across the street there. I can clearly identify that parcel. I wonder.
Right, yeah, and there's the ability to essentially export this data, and then we can export other data from other GIS data sets, and then we can really easily look across the two of them to see where we're targeting certain either individuals, business owners, or property types. But for the public-facing tool, it just essentially breaks it down. Mostly residential is kind of the primary audience.
So another interesting data point might be, I don't even know exactly what you would call it, but sort of developable land. In other words, if you've got an acre of land and you've got one little house on it, that's like a high target likelihood that somebody's going to come in and want to develop that, right? It would be good to know those properties and what their current canopy is and record. Now, this is the other question I have. So if you update when the new LiDAR comes out, does this all go away, or is this now stored? So we have the 2014 version, we have the 2018 version, we have the...
Right, yeah, so we'll have this information. We're going to, essentially, this is like a packet of data that we have right now. We can house it internally, and we're going to have like an external site that we'll have. So when this gets updated, if we ever decide to pursue another contract to get, say, a 2022 version, we can cross the two of them, similar to how I was mentioning we can cross other GIS data sets and see what percentages have changed and looking for drastic percentage differences. The value of this tool is that it is exclusively GIS driven, meaning that we don't have people driving around having to quantify these values themselves. So it kind of removes the boots on the ground from some of these assessments, which is really where a lot of the time and resources would have to go. Of course, when working with GIS data, you have to take it with a grain of salt in some senses, because it is a data set that is classified at a certain extent, right? You can't go super zoomed in and expect everything to show up in your GIS data, right? Because it's pretty... I have to be careful with terms of scale, because I know Nick's, our GIS coordinator, is watching this, don't get me wrong, but there's scale and grain when it comes to GIS data, and you have to make sure that you're aware of what you're importing and making assessments based off of if it's purely GIS. So for looking at developable land, if there is a current GIS data set that has that type of information, we can definitely use that, incorporate it, cross-check. the value of this is that it takes out that qualitative assessment. So what might be needed for that is the boots on the ground, having people going around and kind of keeping a track on certain properties. And once they have those property addresses and parcel addresses, we can always use tools like this to assess changes over time.
I think we might be able to add a tool that allows you to filter by parcel size as well, to look that way. So that'd be something we could perhaps add to that.
Yeah, so spatial size of parcels.
Right.
I'm not going to speak just in case I'm totally wrong, but
So if it's say R5, but
Right.
it's 4 times the minimum R5 lot size, and there's one house, those 3 factors.
yeah, and that's all the type of work that GIS comes in handy, because there are algorithms and calculations you can do with data sets. You can grab an average parcel size, see what parcels are above average, cross-check that with low or high canopy values, and then pull up a list of addresses. It's just, your result is only as good as the data you put into it. So you just have to make sure that, this data set is amazing, and Dr. Shondas has done a great job at creating a tool like this and doing a lot of internal calculations and process to come up with these values. But, 32% canopy cover, we can switch this over to imagery, and you can start to see that it's based off of the canopy of these trees, but this is from 2014, right? So if we were to look at the same image today, it would be a different value. And so no matter what, we'll definitely need to make sure that we do have a in-field verification process, especially if we're going to be using this for any sort of work with the community. But on a larger scale, especially for outreach and general planting strategies of neighborhood scale, I think this is going to be really valuable for our team to use.
This is super cool.
Yeah, I like zooming around it and just
Yeah.
seeing.
I know what I'm doing next time I can't sleep.
Yeah, right? No, it's a great interactive tool, and we're hoping to use it in tandem with our public outreach to make sure people know what's in their community and the character of their neighborhoods. And I'm envisioning NDA competitions of canopy cover percentages and seeing if we can boost different areas. But, and you can see, it's a really cool resource to be able to
Can you
utilize.
isolate our right-of-ways and say what our canopy cover is on our right-of-way?
Yeah, so these little, right here, you can
Right,
click
but
on it.
like writ large. So we know that the canopy cover for Milwaukee is whatever it is, 23%, 26%. What is the canopy cover of all of our right-of-way?
So I believe, so if you go back to your overview, the problem is that it's on these block scales for spatial data, right? So we can get these general canopy cover areas, and that's qualitative just simply because we don't have aggregate data. So with GIS data, right, so they'll have your canopy cover for a little square. The way GIS for this information works is essentially a lot of squares together on a map. And the more you start to average those squares together, the less and less accurate that data starts to get. So you can have, for example, if this, say this block right here, if this was all canopy cover on this square of this large, you would say, oh, there's a 20% canopy coverage, while the rest of it could be a parking lot,
But you can, I think when you get to the census block level, you can filter out
Yes.
Street or parcel,
just
right?
select the street.
So,
Yeah.
so what I can do is I can go street, and I can only look for areas that have less than 15% canopy cover, right? And so that way, Julian and his team, if they have a limited amount of resources, can isolate plantings to these areas. But what's also really important is then zooming back out and seeing where our socioeconomic information is to also include that into a planting strategy.
Very cool. That's exciting.
Awesome. All right, well, I'm going to close this for now, but it will be back up on the public page soon.
So the plan is to actually make that public on the city's website eventually?
Yes,
Yes.
we'll have a link actually, and we're going to actually host this data on a cloud server.
Okay.
Because, so it will be shortly. Probably looking at sometime in November, that'll happen. Working with IT right now to host that. So,
Great.
Very cool.
Exciting.
yeah,
Good job.
thanks. I think that was pretty much it. So,
Thank you.
That's
Thanks.
a lot.
Yeah, it is. It's a whole lot.
We're excited.
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next up, we have the library board and annual update, and this will be presented by our library director, Katie Newell, and our board chair, Jason Price. Welcome.
Hey.
Good evening, Mayor and councilors. It's time for that annual report. The library board has it's a problem reporting in that it's sometimes hard to separate what the board does and what the library board does because they're so intertwined. So I don't want you to think all we're reporting on is the process of, the progress of the library, but also what the board has done. I just want to point out that the library board this year has served, Ryan Healy has served on the library task force for the project library building ever since we've been doing this. His father did back in 1999. So same thing, same goal, but we're getting it built now. So, and then we have Krista Downs is on our LDAC. Carol Miller is the alternate for that committee. Robin is on the foundation board. And then we have Jess Stetson and Aaron Lee are going to be doing the library district task force. So they are serving the library and the community very well. But then I'm going to turn it over to Jason to talk about what all the library has been doing.
Great. Well, we've almost got a library built. Very close
Very
to
exciting.
opening. We'd like to think it's been just over a year since we closed the library and almost a year since we opened at the temporary site. The numbers that I believe you have in your report are lower, but with the new location, not as convenient. We were closed for a month. A 20% drop-off is not too bad. And another big drop-off's been Wi-Fi usage. I guess not getting as much drop-in to use the Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi's been down 68%.
Huh, that's interesting.
Well, and we also don't have a place for people to sit necessarily for hours, like some people would do, to actually use the Wi-Fi. We have it, it's available, but the seating is limited. We finally cleared out a room because we had the conference room, which sometimes would be used. Then, so we cleared out one of the smaller rooms and set up chairs and tables in there. And it's gone up a little bit since we did that. But yeah, we had a lot of drop-by people that would use the Wi-Fi.
We have really cut down on the adult programs over the last year due to the lack of space, and the children's programs have been, the level has been lower, but they've been taking place at the Wichita Center this year so that there is space available. We had a successful summer reading program, and a couple of district-wide changes have been the online cultural pass. So instead of having to stop by the library to pick up a cultural pass, you can go online, reserve it, see when it's available for specific sites, and then either have it on your phone or on your library card. So no longer need to come to the library, pick it up, or remember to drop it off. Also, a mobile app has been in use in the district, and that has been successful, I think, that people can use their phones easier than accessing the website through the phone. The collections have been winnowing down with things starting to come out of storage, decisions are being made, and 2 years ago almost that things started being put away, and some things have changed since then, so it's not worth putting them back in circulation, taking up limited shelf space. I believe we're going to have about 92,000 items in the collection.
Yeah, we've been focusing on the past 2 years of kind of tailoring our collection to what our patrons have asked for, and to make it a more streamlined collection so that it's more reflective of what we have. We don't have as many extra copies, but we also didn't have the room. And this was at the old library. We're going to continue that moving in because we want to have room to buy new books in the near future. So, and we did cut that back in this past year, trying to save money. Anything that we had left over went into the building project. So we've been kind of on a very austerity program at the library for at least the past year, and it's done well. I have to actually say I'm very proud of my staff for doing so well at the pods. They've made it home to a lot of people. We still have people coming in. Our attendance people still are coming. We're still getting, around 400 or 500 people coming in every day, which I think is fantastic. And we're going to get our numbers back up when we return to the library, but considering where we are, and I am quite proud of what we've been doing.
And the Library of Things is now open and running at the library, and I believe in other locations around the district, but
We have eight libraries are in the pilot program.
Cool.
I walked in on Sunday, and I was there with my husband, Colin, and I said, look, I can get rid of my pressure canner. Which he's excited about, too, because shelf space is a premium.
And that has been a lot of what we have are people just wanted to try something. They wanted to try the Instapot. Do I want to go buy that? Would I really use it? We have, a small ice cream maker, but people can try. Someone might have a little bit of mending. They can borrow a sewing machine for a week, get all their sewing done, bring it back, and then they don't have to have it stored anywhere. There was a really good article just about the sustainability aspect of something like this in the Mountain Times, I believe, and they were just talking about how you don't have to store all these things that you might use once a year. We have rakes, we have shovels. We just added a power washer that,
I am coming.
yeah, well, I'll be there. And now you can put things on hold, and you can have it for a week. You can only have one item out at a time. So that's, we had a patron from another library actually went just hog wild and put in all these holds, but not realizing that you had to pick it up from the library that it's held at. And so we all would get these requests, and we would have to change it to, you have to come pick it up at Milwaukee, or you have to go pick it up at Sandy, or, and so I think her list has dwindled since.
I think my personal favorite were the outdoor ukuleles in the Library of Things. Outdoor ukuleles.
I didn't know there was a difference
don't know what
between
that means
indoor
either.
and outdoor.
It's a teaser. We have to check one out to find out what's different.
We have
No, I'm
hammocks
thinking
for
about a
camping.
dehydrator,
There is one. I believe we have that. If we don't, another library, and of course, you would have to go to that library, but
And is there a card catalog? Is there a catalog of what's in the?
it's in the catalog,
It's in
and
the
I believe
normal
you look under, like Library of Things, and they have lists of.
It's online.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a part. I mean, you go in and put a hold on it, just like it's a
Mix it
book
with a
or a DVD.
That's in there.
Yeah.
There's one
I saw
at
that
our
in the
library.
pictures.
Yeah.
So Some of the libraries spent, just a portion of their money, holding the rest to spend to see how the things that they
Right,
bought.
what do people ask
We just went and spent all our money. We just were like, we're going for broke here. We want to have as much out as we can. So I believe our grant was right around $7,100, and I believe we went a little bit over that. But
Shopping, huh?
they had so much fun. It's just like, ooh, I can buy whatever I want. Yay. And, we had puzzles that we'd had in the children's department. So, it's like, well, let's put those in there. And it's been amazing how they've gone out. The game Uno has been out many times already. And it's like, okay, I wouldn't have thought about Uno, but so it's been fun to see what people like and what they're asking for. So we're pretty, we divided it up. Of course, I can't read without my glasses. We had arts and crafts, home equipment and media tech, rec and outdoor, home and garden, game and toys, kitchen, music, instruments, and event party. So you can get a karaoke machine for your next party.
Oh, there, my birthday party.
Yeah,
Karaoke,
yeah.
right? Yeah.
I mean, we
I'm
even,
gonna be on stage.
I don't know if we've gotten this yet, but, we were going to have like folding chairs. If you needed some plastic folding chairs, just like a package of 6. And a folding table, 6-foot table.
Yeah,
So
we
that,
need
I
that
know I'm
too.
having this party, let me borrow a table, and then I don't have to store it.
Let's have
Great.
So, but yeah, it's been very, very popular.
Yeah, since I can only take out one thing at a time.
We're also preparing to accept our youth members on the board. We're prepared to make updates to the bylaws as needed to fit with the city vision on this.
Great.
Great.
Good.
Now we're just waiting for that to get passed, and then we'll change our bylaws. So next year we'll be saying that we changed our bylaws, but this year we did not, so.
There was a story was it yesterday or the last couple of days about increased requests to Oregon libraries to have books removed for different reasons. Have you received any
No.
requests to have books removed from your library?
We have not.
I don't know why you're disappointed by that.
No, I am
That makes me
so,
feel
no, our users are very, I believe, open to having everything in there. And since I've been here, I have not had anything challenged or requested to be removed. And I'm very proud of that, that I think it just shows what a good community this is, that, they're very open to whatever's there. If you don't want to see it, don't look at it,
check it out.
but someone else might want to.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and I hope just saying that we didn't jinx it and people
Yeah, I was
are,
just thinking
kind of
maybe I created
yeah.
some sort of a challenge, but anyway, I'm with you. That makes me feel pretty proud of my community.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. It's exciting.
I had a question. I was interested to hear that you moved the children's programs to the Wichita Center, and I know that we sometimes sort of bat around the idea of how can we provide more goods and services outside of the downtown core of Milwaukee. So I'm wondering if you've just filed away, I know we don't have the money for it right now, but filed away in the back of your mind the possibility of doing something like that again, or if you have any reflections on how that worked out, if you felt like it served the community well or reached a different set of people in the community, or, stuff.
No, the year before at Ardenwald, the turnout was exceptional.
Okay.
And that's where we did it, the summer program the year before. On your sheets, if you look under children's and teen programs, down at the bottom is the outreach that we did this past year. And that's par for what we usually do. I know they go multiple times. They, do the free summer lunch.
Right.
They do the Wichita Head Start, and that's a program they've been doing for years.
For a long time, yeah.
And so they do all of these. They're really focusing on how they can reach out. In the past, they've done a lot with the teen parent and working with them with, early education, early reading. And Jana and her team have been doing that for years.
Yeah.
I think some of it has to do with space. Those places weren't as limited for the extremely popular Reptile Man, shows like that, maybe were crowded in the amphitheater, weather permitting, and definitely inside.
Yeah.
So having a community room available at the new library will be,
Yeah.
I believe, a boon for those programs too.
Yeah, we still might need to go to Ardenwald for those, because Reptile Man does come in with like several hundred people that want to see him. So
Obviously.
some of those we might look to still go out and
I do.
have it a different place.
Well, it's a good, the synergy between that and the summer feeding program for
Yes.
kids
Yeah, it's
is a great, synergy. So, I wouldn't necessarily want to see us keep everything at the library. It's
No,
good to be out.
and before, what we were doing was just the free snacks. But by doing these programs at the Wichita Center at Ardenwald, we were able to participate in the lunch, the
Right.
free lunch. So any of those that we can do, we didn't have, we don't have the facilities because you have to store the lunch in refrigerators. And we didn't have access to that. And that will still be, because for that many lunches, you need a lot of storage. School's perfect.
Yeah.
They have that kind
They've got all
of
of that.
refrigerator. So that is something that we might consider, or we might just go again with the route of doing the snacks in the afternoon that they provide, and you come to the program and you get free snacks.
Nice.
Okay, we can end any time.
This is great.
We don't have a date yet, but it's coming.
For the opening.
We will be in as soon as we can. We're all looking forward to moving. I know sometimes I mention the word move, and we're going to be moving, going, and everybody kind of like, no, we're not quite ready, but we are. But it's time. We had somebody in last week who's interested in our pod for after we've left there, and so I was showing him all the highlights. And, I was like, yes, and you would want this as soon as possible, right? So we need to get out of here so you can have it.
So we own those?
No,
Okay.
we rent them.
Okay, that's what
And they're looking to rent once we're out. And so, so I was,
In the same space?
no.
Okay.
That they don't get. TriMet, it does not want to make that a permanent
Yeah,
pod
sure.
place.
rental location.
So
What if we had some food carts?
I'm staying out of that discussion.
Very sweet.
So, any other questions?
Good job.
Yeah.
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 Exciting.
Well, thank you. And
stuff. Thank you.
I
Thanks
really
for
look
your-
forward to our opening and seeing all of you there.
Yes. Us
And
too.
it's going to be really nice.
It is.
So,
Yeah.
It's gonna
thank
be
you.
very exciting.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thanks.
See you. Thank you very much. Unless there is, oh wait, no, that's it. Unless we have anything else anybody wants to do now? Okay, so then the work session is adjourned.
Okay.
Be back here at 6 o'clock.